August. Morning. The city of Bryansk. I'm sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee and not touching anyone. Leka calls on my cell phone. I pick up the phone. Hello, Gray. Are you awake? No. I'm drinking coffee. What are you doing? A digger under the nickname RIP has sent me an invitation to a dig on the forum. He needs 3 men to help him. He says he knows where a German airplane with loot lies. The place is remote, behind the swamps. Says that no one knows and he alone found the path to it. Lek, his nickname is strange. Maybe he's a con man? I don't know, Gray, but he seems to be telling it well. Where's the place? How far is it? About 50 kilometers from the city. He won't tell us exactly until we agree. He's afraid we'll go without him. Logical. What do you think? I think you take Sonia and come to my place. The 3 of us will discuss everything. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang and Lek got away from the keyboard. He opened it and let the guys into the apartment. While you were getting there, I talked to RIP and found out the details. He says the plane is fully manned, and it must have been hit by anti-aircraft guns. Anyway, it crashed in a deep forest with swamps around it. It fell neatly, the cargo is almost all intact except for provisions. The crew ate it. They parachuted out in the same place. Couldn't get out through the swamp, so that's where they died. What a thriller, Sonia said, stammering. He stuttered a little, especially when he was nervous. That's where there are dead fascists lying around? I think so, I said thoughtfully. Why does he need us? Questioned Sonia. Why doesn't he take all the loot for himself? Let me ask him. He's online, answered Leka, and, having typed a question, sent it to his new acquaintance with a swift tap on the enter. The reply came instantly. I alone can carry almost nothing through the swamp. There are 500 meters of sludge to go through, in some places up to my chest. I can't do it alone. I'd need 3 men to help me. Can you get that many? No problem. We just 3 of us go digging, answered RIP Leka. And if we go in winter when the swamp is frozen? I said. And if we go in winter? Leka immediately typed and sent it. In that place, the swamp doesn't freeze even in the bitterest frosts. And it's even more dangerous to go there in winter, responded RIP. Then we won't go in winter, reasonably remarked Sonia. So, Mr. Diggers, shall we go with RIP to see the trophy airplane? Asked Leka. He is waiting for an answer from us. Why did he come to us? I asked. I already asked him. He says that he read my comments on the forum, and he liked my attitude to the topic of war. I wrote there that if we find our fighters, we do not touch, and report the coordinates of this place to the military patriotic group search, and they rebury the remains. Explained Leka. I see, I replied. Then we have the same understanding. Ours is sacred and no one called the Germans here. That's good. So what do we decide, guys? Leka asked again. I'm on vacation, I can go tomorrow, and Sanka quit his job. I answered for the 2 of us. My boss will also let me go for a week. Thought, said Leka. Well, write him that we agree. Let him say where to go and where we will meet him. Leka drummed the question on the keyboard and immediately received an answer, which read as follows. We'll meet at your place. I can come tomorrow morning and we will start at once. We'll drive 50 kilometers to the village of Georgievka. I have a hut there, inherited from my grandfather. From there we'll go into the woods to the swamp. What kind of car do you have? We have a Neva, a Russian all-terrain vehicle, answered Leka. Neva is good. From equipment take with you Vadersy, it is such boots, overalls if you do not want to get wet in the swamp sludge. Don't take metal detectors, we won't dig. It's all there on the surface, right in the airplane. Oh, and give me the address. Where should I go tomorrow? Came from RIP. Leka sent the address. We decided to start at 9 a.m. The rest of the day was devoted to preparation. The next day, about 9 a.m., equipped and prepared Neva stood at the entrance. Leka was loading provisions into it, and San and I were digging in the trunk, checking whether something from the equipment was not forgotten. "Hello to the diggers," came from behind the guys. All of them turned around and saw a tall, skinny guy, about 25 years old, in camouflage overalls. "Are you RIP?" asked Leka. "Yeah, he is. Ramashov Igor Petrovich, abbreviated RIP. Gave out a new acquaintance. Now it's clear where such a nickname comes from," said Leka, and the guys in turn introduced themselves, shaking Igor's hand. "And this is your all-terrain vehicle?" inquired Igor. "It is," Leka answered proudly, and clapped his hand on the roof of the car. "A good horse, just what we need, and even has a winch in the front. A great car," Igor concluded respectfully. "It's Leka who is our master of all trades. Technics loves him," I joked. "And UW, what are you doing on a lung?" Sonia asked, seeing that Igor had nothing with him. "I have all my gear in Georgievka, so I'm ready to start." "Then saddle up," said Leka. The guys settled down, and Neva, rumbling engine, rushed towards Georgievka. Igor was put on the front seat next to Leka. Sank and I sat in the back. "So you say you have a cabin there?" I asked, turning to Igor. "Yes, a hut from my grandfather. I inherited it. He was a partisan in those places during the war. He was about 16 then, so he told me about this airplane. He said that one night he heard the rumble of a German airplane, which flew from the Germans to our rear over the forest. He was already an experienced partisan in his years. He could distinguish our airplanes from German ones by their sound. And a few hours later, when it began to dawn, he saw the plane flying backwards. Our anti-aircraft gunners must have treated it badly. The crew of 4 people jumped out of the plane. Grandpa said the plane crashed on Snake Island. It's an island in the swamps with no path to it. No one ever went there because the swamp is impenetrable and the place is considered unclean by the people. The airplane has been lying there ever since. My grandfather said that during the war, ours sent there a group of capture, but they really could not get through. Neither locals nor partisans could find a path there, and there was no time for pilots. Ours were preparing a grandiose offensive, and there was such an uproar. Tanks, artillery, infantry, everyone was going somewhere, running. So we spit on the krauts and decided they couldn't get out of there. How did you find the path? Leka asked. I've been looking for it for months. Literally lived in the woods near the swamp. I've been living in the city for a long time. All the young people have left Georgievka. There's no work. But I spent all my vacations there. I've been looking for years, and recently I got lucky. I literally found the path by touch. I really wanted to see what happened on the island. So how's the situation there? I asked. I didn't find the plane right away. By the time I got to the island, I was exhausted. When I rested, I went to look for it. There is a thick forest, visibility is poor. I had to wander around the island. Then I saw him. When he fell, there was almost no fuel left in him, so he didn't explode, and he landed quite neatly. The wings were torn off, but the fuselage was practically intact. And the krauts? I continued. They didn't do so well. They never got off the island. Anyway, when we get there, you'll see for yourself. In 45 kilometers, we turned off the highway and drove along the gravel road through the forest. A village appeared behind the next turn. From the former Georgievka remained a dozen old houses and a single street between them. Naturally, there were no young people here, but there were old women somewhere, tending to their households. 2 bearded, colorful grandfathers sat on a bench in front of a shabby house and watched the Neva with the boys. Igor asked them to stop the car on the outskirts of the village near an old hut. This is the inheritance from my grandfather, said Igor, pointing at the dilapidated hut. This is my base now. Here I have everything I need for digging. The guys got out of the car. At the neighboring house, a grandmother was digging in the front garden. Hi, Baba Nur, shouted Igor. I see you don't like the piece? "Good afternoon, Igor," answered Grandma. "Well, I wanted to warm my bones a little in the sun." She continued, "It's as cold at home as in the grave. Aren't you guys hungry? I've made borscht and pies. Come to my place, I'll feed you," suggested the hospitable old woman. Sonya was about to step in the direction of her house, but Igor put his hand on his shoulder and stopped his impulse to taste village borscht. "Thank you, Baba Nur," Igor replied loudly. "Some other time. We're in a hurry." Suddenly, a strange horseman turned from behind the house, straight into the street. He was riding on a stick. He looked like a grown man, barefoot, wearing some kind of rags, riding on a stick like a horse, shouting all over the street. But, go, my dear." Seeing the boys, this cavalryman directed his stick horse towards them and galloped closer. "Look what a horse I have." He turned to the boys. "And I'm a hussar. Do you know there's no one here? It's empty." The excited hussar continued to shout. "That's enough, Boria. You're scaring people. Go to your mom. She's probably looking for you," Igor sternly commanded. The hussar turned his horse around and galloped away. "This is our village fool Borka. Don't pay any attention to him," explained Igor. "He lives in a neighboring village about 5 kilometers from here, and sometimes he drops in on us. He has a horse like that. He can ride 5 versts." Opening the old padlock on the door of the hut, Igor joked. When the lock gave way, Igor gestured to invite everyone inside. Inside, the furnishings were ascetic: a hayloft, a couple of rooms, and a Russian stove. The furniture included a bed, a table, a few chairs, and an old sideboard. But literally everywhere were military trophies found by Igor. On the wall hung German helmets and several sabers. On the shelves were knives, belt buckles, cartridge casings, flasks, and metal mugs with eagles, as well as medals and insignia. The finds were in various states of disrepair. A rusty Maxim machine gun stood on the floor. The guys rushed to examine the collection. "You look around, and I'll gather my equipment," said Igor. "Not a weak collection you have," noted Lekha. "Aren't you afraid of being stolen in your absence? I keep the most valuable things in a safe place, and here are just a few things." Igor left the house and came back in a couple of minutes, holding 2 good, folding shovels. "Why shovels? You said you wouldn't have to dig," Sonya asked. "I'll tell you later," Igor answered cryptically. Igor closed the house. Everyone got into the car and drove into the forest. Igor showed the way. We managed to drive about 3 kilometers, and then there were such thickets that we had to leave the car. We walked about another kilometer and came to a swamp. We took a break at the swamp and had a little snack. Then everyone cut down a long pole for himself. In bogs, there is no way without a pole. They put on raincoats over their clothes. Igor stayed in his overalls. "Why did you forget your waterproofs at home?" I turned to Igor. "My overalls are made of water-repellent material. They don't get wet," answered him. We looked at each other incredulously. "You see, here's the first milestone and there's the second?" Igor pointed to a long stick sticking out on the bank and to the next one sticking out of the swamp about 50 meters away from it. "One by one, we'll go straight to it. Be very careful, follow me strictly. From one marker to the next, not a step to the side. Every wrong step could cost you your life," he continued. "Don't make it worse or we'll change our minds." Lekha muttered. "Good, let's go," Igor commanded and went into the swamp. Everyone walked in a chain, first knee-deep, then waist-deep in the slush. We passed a few milestones. The sludge is up to our chests. There were some mossy bumps, snags, sedges floating around. Some news and flies are flying. The swamp bubbles and stinks of some rottenness. We had to wander left and right, but all the milestones were placed neatly, and Igor walked very confidently, which made us optimistic. At last they reached dry land. The shore of Snake Island rose sharply out of the swamp. Igor turned around and started to help us get out. Then he climbed up himself. When he climbed to the shore after us, We looked at him and opened our mouths. He was completely clean and dry. We were wearing rubber waders up to our chests, and we were standing in the mud and tina. And Igor came out of the swamp completely clean and dry. Sanik stammered even more at what he had seen. We're as dirty as pigs, and he's like a shining angel, crawling out of the swamp. Sonia was pointing at Igor. I, of course, realized that all sorts of new impressions awaited us on Snake Island. The German airplane, different finds. But what happened next simply shocked us, and we forgot about Igor's wonderful waterproof suit in a second. From behind the bushes, a big kraut jumped out at us, in full uniform, mad eyes, yelling something in German. We understood only Hand hoch. He raises his machine gun and fires a line over our heads. I felt the bullets whizzing right through my hair. Fear pierced us to the marrow of our bones, and we raised our hands as if on command. Everyone was numb with horror, all except Igor. And then it started. In general, from each new act of this horrible performance, our jaws dropped lower and lower. "Get out of here, asshole!" yelled at the whole forest Igor. Then he rushed to the kraut and kicked his ass with all his might. His foot flew through the figure of the thug, and the German vanished before our eyes like a light haze. I've had enough of him, running through the woods, yelling at everybody, excitedly explained to us Igor returning. When he came back, he looked at us. We froze dirty with our hands up, our mouths open and our eyes bulging. "You can put your hands down," Igor said slowly. We synchronously lowered our hands. "And close our mouths," he continued calmly. We also synchronously carried out this command. "Fellas, there've been bricks put away, right in the waders," without stuttering pronounced Sanik. "Whoa, and the kraut was healing," surprised Igor. He cured Sasha's stuttering. "Igor, dear, what did we just see?" I finally regained the power of speech. "I'll explain everything, don't worry," Igor began. "Take off your waterproofs and follow me. I'll tell you on the way," he continued. We did so, and he led us to the airplane. Well, as I said, there were 4 Germans on the plane. They all landed successfully on this island. The plane also landed more or less normally. The airplane had a solid supply of canned food, dry rations, and cognac. But they couldn't get off the island. They lived here for a while and then they got nervous. They started fighting and quarreling. They started shooting at each other with brandy. In general, they went completely wild here. Meanwhile, while Igor was talking, we came to 3 hills. And as a result of their wildness, we have 4 graves, he continued, pointing with his hand at the mounds. But I ask you to notice that one grave is not filled up, and in it lies the bandit who frightened you on the local beach. Since he was left alone in the end of natural selection, he had to dig his own grave and put a bullet in his head. But there was no one to cover him up, and since he was not buried as it should be, his rebellious soul is running around the neighborhood, walking right across the swamp to the other side, shouting all sorts of nasty things in German and scaring the rare mushroom hunters and other tourists. "Awesome. Is it a ghost that frightened us so much?" said Leka. "Totally true. That's what a ghost is, to scare," responded Igor. "And as soon as you bury his mortal remains, he will immediately leave this world and will no longer run through the forests of our vast homeland, scaring people," he concluded. We came to the last grave. At the bottom, there was indeed a skeleton in rags. There was a neat hole in his skull and a rusty pistol in his right hand. I didn't really believe in ghosts, but after what I'd seen with my own eyes, I had nothing to object. Treasure Island, man. Stevenson's got it down. Looking at the skeleton, mysteriously said Leka. "Yes, by the way, where is the treasure itself? How far is it to the airplane?" I asked Igor. "The plane is about 100 meters from here, but I strongly recommend that you first fill the grave, so that this Barmely did not spoil our mood, popping out of the bushes at the most inopportune moments," said he. Indeed, to meet with this Barmali no longer wanted. And San and I, taking the very shovels that Igor had grabbed, began to bury the remains of the occupant. The soil was sandy, and we managed very quickly. Now there were 4 mounds, 3 old and overgrown and 1 new. Well, there's a grave for every fascist, said Leka's eulogy. Whoever comes to us with a sword will die by the sword. Sonia continued without stuttering at all. At that moment we received so many impressions that we had no time to digest them and be surprised by a succession of new ones. But when Igor brought us to the plane, it was something. The battered but fairly intact fuselage, covered with moss, lay at the end of the overgrown furrow he had plowed when he landed. Young trees grew along the sides of the furrow, as the old ones had been cut off by the wings. The wings themselves hadn't survived the battle with the trees either, and their debris lay somewhere in the thicket. The picture was mesmerizing. An uninhabited island with skeletons and a ghost, a dense forest, an old wrecked airplane, and for treasure hunters, what is not a theme for a novel? Around the plane were visible signs of life because the 4 Germans lived here for some time. They made a fire, prepared firewood, cooked food. Inside the plane, it was a Klondike. Lots of boxes with Nazi eagles, most of them unopened. There were weapons in some of them, provisions in others, uniforms, whatnot. Even neat stacks of Deutsch stamps, and most importantly, all in perfect condition. We were absolutely delighted. Our eyes lit up when we took these items in our hands. Guys, you and I don't have much time. You have one more very important thing to do, Igor said mournfully. We became wary. At that moment, it seemed to us that all our adventures were over. But we were wrong. I want to show you something. It's not far away. Igor continued very seriously. He took us away from the treasures and led us to a small ravine about 50 meters from the plane. We came to the edge and looked down. "Oh, Reen," Sanek said in a frightened voice. At the bottom of the ravine, Igor was lying on his back, with a sharp tree root sticking out of his chest in the heart area. It was obvious that his body had been lying like that for several days. We looked at the body in the ravine, then at Igor standing next to us. The picture was shocking. In an uninhabited forest at the bottom of a ravine lies a dead body, and his living copy stands on the edge of the ravine and looks at us. "Who's that?" Leka wheezed, though it was clear that it was Igor. "It's me." Igor confirmed our worst guesses. "How?" Leka wheezed again. "When I found the path to the island and climbed ashore, I started looking for the plane. But the first thing I saw were the graves of Germans. Slowly, as if meditating, began to broadcast next to standing Igor. Walking by, I spat on the graves and said, 'So be it for you.' Then I found the airplane. It was evening. It was getting dark. I, like Ali Baba in the cave with treasures, marveled at the finds in the bowels of the airplane. And then that asshole with the machine gun you buried popped up. You can't imagine how scared I was, because I didn't know he was a ghost. Although I don't think that would have made me feel any better. Anyway, I ran like I'd never run before. Fritz is right behind me, running and yelling and shooting. In the dark, I stumbled and fell into this ravine and hit a root. That's how death came to me. So what are you? A ghost? Sonia wheezed now, looking at Igor with huge eyes. Yes, I am a ghost. But we can feel you. I started. That's right. Igor interrupted me. As long as my body is not buried, I am in 2 worlds at the same time. I can disappear, move in space, walk through the air, but at the same time I can interact with objects from your material world. And as soon as you bury the body, my spirit will finally leave this world. That's why I brought you here. You have to bury my body, or I'm kind of stuck between worlds. Why did you? I started again. I can't do it myself. Igor interrupted me again. Only the living should bury the dead. That's the rule here. So this Kraut, it turns out, could have taken a real machine gun and put us all here? Scared Sanek. No, he could not. First, he has many innocent victims on his conscience, and secondly, he is a suicide. In the afterlife, he does not have an enviable fate, and he can't interact with objects from your world. Igor explained. The torment he is experiencing has made his mind completely insane, and if he could, he would destroy everything in his path. But the weight of his sins limits his ability to do so. So he could only pop out of that world like a genie out of a bottle and scare people. But after his burial, he won't be able to do that either. Igorek continued to explain. And how did you find us? Turned to Igor Leka. After I realized that my body died, I instantly returned to my apartment in Bryansk, sat down at the computer and began to scour the forums, looking for those who will help me bury the kraut and my body. That's how I came across you. And the bait was an airplane. He explained. Guys, we don't have much time. It's going to get dark soon, and I don't think you'll want to stay overnight on this island. Igor got worried. That's right, confirmed Sanik. While we were digging the grave, Igor stood nearby and instructed us. In my pants pocket, take the keys to the garage. I've already emailed the address to Leka. Go there. There are 2 black suitcases in the corner with all the most valuable things I've found. It's all yours. Take it carefully without leaving a trace or attracting attention, or the cops will be all over it. Everything in the airplane is yours, too. But don't take too much today, you've got a swamp to cross. Follow the marks. You know the rest. When the job was done, we stuck a surviving airplane propeller into the fresh hill instead of a cross. Igor gratefully hugged each of us. We said goodbye and he vanished into thin air like a mist. Having taken a little bit of the most valuable things from the airplane, we successfully crossed the swamp, moving exactly according to the milestones. When we reached the car, it was beginning to get dusk. We hurriedly moved towards Georgievka. At the entrance to the village, another shock awaited us. The village looked as if no human had set foot here for 10 years. Instead of houses, overgrown ruins. The street was covered with grass. Only Igor's house was in more or less living condition. But Grandma Nura's house was just a heap of overgrown junk, like all the others. In the evening twilight, the sight made a depressing impression on us. This morning there were people living here, Sanik said with fear in his voice. Leka turned on the headlights and gave the gas. Bouncing on the bumps, we quickly passed the abandoned village. It seems that there were no people here, only dead people. I'm afraid to imagine what kind of borscht Baba Nura wanted to feed us. I was even more frightened of the guys, I said. And remember how Borka the fool said that it was empty here? There was no one, and we are standing among the ghosts, smiling. Leka was already shouting from fear at the whole car, giving gas. Finally, we jumped out on the asphalt and rushed home at full speed. We never went to that airplane again, it was a bit scary. Maybe someday we will, but so far I don't feel like it. And Sonia hasn't stuttered since then. R.I.P. Georgy, Nemov, August, morning, the city of Bryansk. I'm sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee and not touching anyone. Leka calls on my cell phone. I pick up the phone. Hello, Gray. Are you awake? No. I'm drinking coffee. What are you doing? A digger under the nickname RIP has sent me an invitation to a dig on the forum. He needs 3 men to help him. He says he knows where a German airplane with loot lies. The place is remote, behind the swamps, says that no one knows and he alone found the path to it. Lek, his nickname is strange. Maybe he's a con man? I don't know, Gray, but he seems to be telling it well. Where's the place? How far is it? About 50 kilometers from the city. He won't tell us exactly until we agree. He's afraid we'll go without him. Logical. What do you think? I think you take Sonia and come to my place. The 3 of us will discuss everything. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang and Lek got Lek away from the keyboard. He opened it and let the guys into the apartment. While you were getting there, I talked to RIP and found out the details. He says the plane is fully manned, and it must have been hit by anti-aircraft guns. Anyway, It crashed in a deep forest with swamps around it. It fell neatly, the cargo is almost all intact except for provisions. The crew ate it. They parachuted out in the same place. Couldn't get out through the swamp, so that's where they died. What a thriller, Sonia said, stammering. He stuttered a little, especially when he was nervous. That's where there are dead fascists lying around? I think so, I said thoughtfully. Why does he need us? Questioned Sonia. Why doesn't he take all the loot for himself? Let me ask him. He's online, answered Leka, and, having typed a question, sent it to his new acquaintance with a swift tap on the enter. The reply came instantly. I alone can carry almost nothing through the swamp. There are 500 meters of sludge to go through.